You know, some people might say that, in terms of views, this is a bad choice of video topic.
3, 2, 1, go!
What's going on, gamers? It's me, a guy who likes Super Mario 64 hacks. If you don't know what those are, consider this video required viewing material, because this video will largely assume you've played the vanilla game and have at least some understanding of what a ROM hack even is. Sorry, Mom. Please keep watching, though. So, if you were to ask me what my favorite SM64 hack is, I'd say, probably one of the Star Revenge games. Because there are a lot of them, and they also kind of all blend together in my mind. I really couldn't tell you the difference between Star Revenge 6.25, Luigi's Adventure DX, and Star Revenge 6.5, Wrath of the Dimensional Flower, but I could say with some confidence that both of them are fun. In all of my time playing Star Revenge games, there's only been one I didn't like, and we'll get to that soon. Still, despite calling myself a fan of the series, I haven't played all of them, and I certainly haven't played them in any reasonable order, partially because a reasonable order doesn't actually exist here. So, the purpose of this video is to force myself to finally examine Star Revenge as a series, not just a group of games. To that end, I'm going to be playing every distinct Star Revenge game in release order, because lore order, and yeah, there's lore, is kind of fucked. And it doesn't include the first 7, maybe 6 games. All you need to know is that I played them in release order, and it just so happens that all of the currently non-canon hacks were released in a continuous group at the very beginning. So, since I definitely don't have the energy to cover the entire series in one sitting, this video will cover that first non-canon group. Up first is Star Revenge 1, released on September 3rd, 2012. I hope somebody out there is looking at this title screen and having a panic attack. Yes, I played the earliest full version listed on romhacking.com, version 1.1. In 2018, Brodit released a significant update, version 1.2, aka Star Revenge 1 Star Takeover. And I mean significant. I think it has the longest section of a changelog in any of the Star Revenge hacks I've looked at so far. Nearly 200 lines of bug fixes, aesthetic enhancements, balance changes, and a ton of quality of life improvements throughout every course. Without a doubt, Star Takeover is the best way to play the original Star Revenge, meaning I'm ignoring the remakes for now. But the whole reason I'm playing the original Star Revenge and not one of its remakes is to get some perspective. Playing the update that brings it more in line with later games and irons out some of the original's subtle shortcomings seems to get in the way of that objective. So, for most of the hacks in this video, I decided to play the original release to get the full, classic Star Revenge experience. Speaking of, this hack is certainly, classic. Yeah, you can sort of feel its age, mainly through its technical issues. There were a few one-off bugs that don't warrant much discussion, but that I think are kind of funny. For example, this weird void out I found literally 2 minutes into my playthrough, or this star crash that, to be fair, the hack warns you about with a sign that I ignored for content. This kind of thing certainly didn't happen often, but it happening at all certainly wasn't great. Two things that were more frequent issues are the awful camera and invisible walls. I find that a lot of older hacks have really shitty cameras, and I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the creators, because the camera sucks in the vanilla game too. And overall, the camera in Star Revenge 1 is a pretty expected level of awful, but there are still a few times where it's notably bad even with this context. The worst examples are the metal cap and vanish cap stages. It's hard to say which of those is more affected by the camera. The metal cap stage is tighter platforming, which can be kind of hard when you can't see, and the vanish cap stage is a giant maze, so the additional disorientation can be quite frustrating. Regardless, the camera in this hack can be aggressively bad in ways that do affect gameplay. And similar to shitty cameras, invisible walls are a pretty common issue in SM64 hacks in general, and many of the early Star Revenge hacks are no exception. That being said, Star Revenge 1 is definitely the worst in this regard. I unfortunately found a lot of invisible walls throughout my playthrough, and... wait a minute. Yeah, it's time for me to address something. Honestly, despite the amount of time I've spent playing SM64, I kind of suck at this game. Generally speaking, the Star Revenge hacks are at the upper end of my skill level. I found Star Revenge 3 and 0.5 to be at my most comfortable level of difficulty, and those are typically considered to be among the easiest in the series, if the romhacking.com difficulty ratings are to be trusted. So on some of the more difficult hacks, I didn't shy away from save stating, and especially on Star Revenge 1 and Redone, I quite frankly abused it. For the most part, the only thing that did was save me time, but that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, focusing on the technical aspects is a little cheap, because the Star Revenge hacks are primarily known for their level design. While they typically lack the same level of unique mechanics and custom code that something like a Kaza hack might have, they remain notable because of their heavy emphasis on solid level design and good old-fashioned platforming fun. Think Star Road instead of Last Impact. And that's why the next problem with Star Revenge 1 is so significant. It seems to me that Brodoot was still finding his footing as a level designer a bit. There are certainly some notably bad levels, but simply pointing those out would miss the point. A few bad levels wouldn't necessarily spoil the bunch. What are much more impactful are the subtle issues present throughout the majority of the experience. In general, many of these levels fail to capture the sandbox feel of the original game. Some are claustrophobic, some are too linear, some are spammed with annoying enemies. I didn't use the word schmovie anywhere in my notes for Star Revenge 1, and that's not a good sign. And it's a real shame, because a lot of the major platforming challenges, the main meat of these stars, aren't bad, but much of the movement connecting them is either restrictive or bland. It doesn't help that a few stages have a lot of repetition either. This is where the occasional linearity becomes an issue. There are a couple of stages generally designed around ascending from point A to point B, with very few branching paths and 6 entire stars sprinkled throughout the ascent. I hate to say it, but these beginning sections become a lot less fun the 6th time around. Overall, these stages, not just the linear ones, are a lot more tick-tock clock than they are Bob-omb Battlefield. And I don't know about you guys, but I fucking hate tick-tock clock. While there are some more specifics I could go into with Star Revenge 1, the issues with level design really put the nail in the coffin on this one. I'm not going to say that Star Revenge 1 is necessarily bad, I didn't hate my time with it, but it's a very average hack from a typically above-average series, and I don't know if I would recommend it to anyone, even a current Star Revenge fan, given that it's not part of the current timeline. What's interesting is that it seems Brodoot was at least somewhat aware of the issues with Star Revenge 1, because the second hack in the series is actually a remake. Star Revenge Redone was released on February 10th, 2013, about a half a year after the original. This section will be a lot shorter than the previous, as you might expect, but before I dig into the changes of this remake, I should address that this is the first Star Revenge hack to have an alternative meme variant. Star Revenge Redone 1.3 version 2.0.
Hello! Okie dokie.
That was a really awesome joke, Brodoot, okay. Despite deciding to try to play the earliest full versions of these early hacks to get as much perspective as possible, I ended up playing version 1.3 of Redone for... well, I don't actually remember why, but it probably doesn't make that much of a difference, seeing as this is still basically just Star Revenge 1 either way. I think a note I made midway through my playthrough sums up Redone pretty well. Looks way better, still plays like ass. A lot of the visuals have been significantly improved, both in texturing and modeling. Perhaps the best example of this is the first hub, which has been completely redesigned, and the difference is like night and day. The visuals in Redone have aged far better than those in the original. The gameplay, on the other hand, has aged around as much in both. In fact, the romhacking.com description of this hack, which I figure was written by Brodoot himself, because this would be a really weird statement if not, calls this hack one of the trio of questionable Star Revenges, along with Night of Doom and Star Revenge 4. This description also calls Redone worse than the original Star Revenge 1 at this point, though the "at this point" probably implies he's comparing it to Star Takeover rather than version 1.1. I hope he is, at least, because if not, I would have to disagree. I'd argue that Redone is at least as good as the original, maybe a bit better, but definitely not worse. However, I can see why somebody would argue the opposite, because the changes in Redone aren't always for the better. A lot of the completely new content falls flat. Precision flying, annoying bosses, the entirety of Course 15, which, according to my notes, should have stayed as cut content. Much of the new stars are significantly harder than the original game. And maybe I'm just mad 'cause bad here, but I don't find these challenges particularly fun. I find them somewhat annoying. It's like a little taste of Night of Doom before the full course. Redone also has the single worst level concept out of all the hacks I played for this video, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the worst in the series. It has a completely untextured level. Clearly, fun was not the #1 priority of this added content. But while the new content generally didn't hit for me, I was a fan of how the existing content was cleaned up. A lot of the worst stars from the original have been improved. Luigi's Quicksand Hell, that awful blind cannon shot, and the entire Vanish Cap stage have all been either completely cut or significantly changed to be more palatable. My issues with repetition in the more linear stages were addressed with shortcuts on later stars, and there were a bunch of smaller tweaks to levels that I probably shouldn't fully list out, but my point is general playability is markedly improved in Redone. There were certainly some issues that never got addressed, and some of the changes were probably for the worst. The increased speed of the final trial comes to mind here. I just don't understand why this exists. But despite that, Redone is really just a better version of Star Revenge 1 with some questionable added content. I would absolutely recommend this version over the original, though at that point you should probably play the next remake. The most fundamental issues of level design weren't fixed here, and it's still not really a particularly fun experience, but it's a far smoother one than the original, and probably a sign of good things to come. I take it back. Okay, I have a confession to make, gamers. I didn't finish Night of Doom for this video. In fact, I barely played it at all. Even with excessive save stating, this hack is significantly above my skill level. Does this fact weaken the value of this video? Probably, but you didn't finish it either, don't lie to me. So this segment's not going to have a ton of meat, but I didn't want to ignore it entirely. Star Revenge 2 Act 2 Night of Doom, originally called just Star Revenge 2 Night of Doom, was released on... okay, I'm gonna stop saying the dates, nobody really cares, but the important thing to keep in mind is that every hack in this video is pretty ancient by my standards. Anyway, Night of Doom is a Kaizo remake of the original Star Revenge, and the hack itself claims that it doesn't have a lot of good design. I wouldn't really know though, because I got literally 1 star before giving up. I'd call that an epic win, and I'd call Night of Doom an epic fail. Thanks for watching. Up next is Star Revenge 3, Mario on... Up next is Star Revenge 3. After having a worse time with the first few hacks than I was really expecting, I was pleasantly surprised by just how well this one still holds up. First, let's talk gameplay, because while these levels still aren't entirely there, they are a step up from the previous hacks. In general, the level design here feels a lot more intentional. Star Revenge 1 had levels that were just a bunch of platforms haphazardly placed around in the sky, or a mostly flat plain filled with chuckyas, that sort of thing. Those felt like 3D models with some stars and enemies placed around. In contrast, Star Revenge 3 has full-on levels. There are more branching paths, there's more layered verticality, levels are generally just denser, and there's less repetition. That's not to say that every level is some interconnected, non-linear masterpiece emulating the map of Dark Souls, but the levels with tons of empty space or large sections of uninteresting movement are definitely less common than they were before. The level design ideas on display here may be somewhat rudimentary, but when you compare it to the level design in the Star Revenge 1 gang, the existence of anything promoting exploration or interesting movement feels like a revolution. The relative lack of railroading is a breath of fresh air. We're moving away from Tick-Tock Clock, and we're moving towards Bob-omb Battlefield here. The most exciting thing to dig into outside of level design is the world structure. Star Revenge 3 has what it describes as an open world, and I guess that's kind of true, technically, but it's also a little misleading. Instead of having a normal hub area, the stages are all connected through warps in other levels. This is a pretty interesting idea. It could potentially help each of the levels feel more like part of the same world, and it works to some extent. It's believable enough that all of these levels could occupy the same island, and little details like being able to see the volcano from level 8 and level 7 are pretty cool. However, the mostly linear stage progression gets in the way of this feeling like an actual, connected environment, and it's the main reason I consider calling this an open world somewhat misleading. Newer Star Revenge games with this sort of structure have these nicely drawn maps, but unfortunately Star Revenge 3 didn't come with one, so I had to make my own. You're welcome. I mapped out every numbered stage, and as you can tell, it's almost completely linear. It's not like you can approach the volcano from either the Sand Temple or the factory. No, there's only one path through the world. And I am acutely aware that this is an odd criticism to levy against a Super Mario 64 hack, especially an older one. Of course, it's not fucking Breath of the Wild. And in fact, this linearity isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just not entirely what I think of when I hear open world structure. And if that's the kind of world you're trying to build, I think more could be done with the level order. Besides that, though, there's not really a ton of significance to dig into with Star Revenge 3. Part of that is the fact that this hack is significantly shorter than the others, having only 65 stars in version 1.0, compared to Star Revenge 1's 100 stars and Redone's 106. The shorter length isn't necessarily a bad thing, it still feels like a complete experience. However, I wonder if only having 8 major stages contributed to its world structure feeling underdeveloped. I guess that's what sequels are for, and even with some aspects feeling sort of half-baked, Star Revenge 3 is still a very solid hack, the first I can truly recommend. It's the first that feels like it belongs in the Star Revenge series, for what that's worth. But like every other hack in this video, it does have a remake, so unless you're interested in the history of the series, you should probably just play that instead. Star Revenge 4, the Kodama Takeover, is the final hack in Brodute's trio of questionable Star Revenges, and I think I'm going to have to disagree with the man himself on this one. Star Revenge 4 is far from flawless, but it's not nearly in the same league of questionable as Redone or Night of Doom. For one thing, Star Revenge 4 does have some new ideas. Even if they don't have much of a positive impact on the game, the simple fact that this hack bothered to experiment with these new things makes me respect it more than the Star Revenge 1 gang. Probably the most notable new idea is the change to the cap switches. All of the special caps are removed, and their boxes are instead replaced with yellow boxes with shells, pink boxes with bob-ombs for opening cannons, or hidden purple boxes with stars. All of these serve a very similar purpose to the special caps from a broader point of view. They lock you out of certain stars until you find the right switch, at which point you're incentivized to revisit old levels. And at this point, I was initially going to complain about these being too simplistic to replace the special caps. But on second thought, those aren't particularly versatile anyway. There are only so many ways you can design a lava bouncing or precision flying challenge, and we've already basically exhausted those by this point in the series. So replacing those with a shell surfing challenge or a cannon shot is less of a step down and more of a Cupid shuffle, a slide to the left. Hold up, that's the fucking Cha-Cha slide who wrote this shit. It's all better than the Vanish Cap at least, fuck the Vanish Cap. There's a little more to dig into with the purple boxes though. I like these quite a lot. The purple boxes are hidden, sometimes far more hidden than any other secret in the game. Finding these requires more than just attentive play for the most part. You need to intentionally explore the places you would otherwise have no reason to even think about. Some of these hiding spots almost feel like you're exploring out of bounds, and I'm a huge sucker for that kind of thing. You're being rewarded for thinking outside of the box. Even in the cases where you can just find the box by looking around, you often have to get a bit creative with how you actually get to it. These boxes are a really solid incentive to run through levels again and explore areas you otherwise would have ignored. My only real issues with the purple boxes have to do with a trend in Brodute's secrets that I'm really not a fan of, which is hiding things off of ledges. This wouldn't necessarily be an awful challenge in a vacuum, but with how finicky Mario 64's camera can be, it becomes a lot more annoying. Even when you do manage to properly move the camera off the ledge, you still can't see very far down. At that point, you either have to enter the see-up camera, completely killing your momentum, or you just have to take a leap of faith. Either way, it massively disrupts the flow of the game. But besides the ledge stars, I was actually a big fan of the purple cap switch. And while this isn't a new idea, I do want to give special mention to the world design in Star Revenge 4. It has a pseudo-open world structure similar to Star Revenge 3, but it also sort of addresses my issues with linearity. Again, I drew my own map, and it's still largely linear except for the first group of levels, stages 1 through 5. Now, I want to clarify, simply having interconnected levels is not necessarily a good thing on its own, but Star Revenge 4 does actually use this to its advantage. There's a reason to approach some of these levels from different entrances. The clearest example is a star in Course 5 that can only be collected by entering from Course 3. Course 3 itself is also a good example, because it's split into two halves that can only be accessed from different areas of the world, at least until you find the yellow switch. Things like this are awesome, but those two examples are the only ones I can think of. Star Revenge 4 showed that it was willing to actually use this unique world design early on, but then it dropped it after like 2 good ideas. I think there's a lot of potential in this type of level layout, but it's just not explored here. It's also a little disappointing that the level themes don't often feel very connected. In Star Revenge 3, it was believable enough that all of the levels were physically linked. In Star Revenge 4, however, it's a little harder to see how you can go from a corrupted jungle to an icy resort to a half-submerged canyon and so on, and that's just a little bit disappointing. That being said, I think that's forgivable given how much more unique the level themes in this hack are compared to the previous ones. While the Star Revenge hacks aren't exactly the most notable when it comes to unique level themes, they still generally do a good job of crafting interesting and visually appealing environments. I haven't talked about it much so far, but even the previous hacks have some standouts. The most notable in Star Revenge 1 was the alphabet stage, as much as that course sucked to play. And while Star Revenge 3's mountain slide didn't have a particularly outlandish theme, it certainly looked nice, quite a bit nicer than the rest of the hack, I'd argue. But while the previous games weren't bad in this regard, Star Revenge 4 is quite a step up. I wrote a bunch of examples here initially, but this section is already dragging as is, so just look at it. Hell yeah. However, while all of that stuff is cool, it's of course not the most important aspect of a Star Revenge hack. And I've gotta say, I actually kind of like a lot of the levels here. The biggest issue with some of them, especially the later ones, is their size. These feel a lot like the levels in Star Revenge 3, but more spread out. There's a lot of empty space for less actual content. Most of these levels don't have the full 6 stars plus a 100 coin star that a typical level does. If you don't count the purple box or 100 coin stars, which are more about exploration than platforming challenges, all of these levels have between 3 and 5 stars. I don't think having fewer stars on its own is a bad thing, but these levels fit fewer major platforming challenges into a larger space, and it gets tiring to travel between them. There are also, of course, some stinkers for other reasons, considering this hack has the most levels out of any in this video. Some of the later stages get pretty repetitive, or just plain tedious. Course 11 was the worst example. I don't even need to say anything, I think it's self-evident. But beyond all that, these still feel more like actual levels than most of Star Revenge 1. A lot of the things I said in the Star Revenge 3 section apply here. These levels are less linear and more layered. I'm going to stop explicitly saying these things after this section because they become the new norm. Even if the empty space makes this lineup of levels less fun than Star Revenge 3, they're still not bad, and not anywhere near as questionable as the levels in the hacks based on Star Revenge 1. And the final thing I want to touch on in this section is something that applies to all of these hacks, actually. The boss battles, and more specifically, the fact that they suck. Like, really, really badly. The bosses in the vanilla game aren't great, because Mario 64 barely has anything resembling a combat system. When your only possible attacks are some variation of either jumping or punching, you don't have a lot of room to design varied, interesting boss encounters. The only reason these aren't awful in the vanilla game is because they're short and sweet. They're over in like half a minute. On top of that, the only boss that's even remotely challenging is Bowser, because, shit. But when the best thing you can say about a boss fight is that you didn't have to spend that long experiencing it, you have an issue. So, here's a question. How do you fix it? Well, not like this. Spamming quicksand, fire spitters, and amps may raise the difficulty, but it doesn't raise the fun. The most fundamental issue here, the fact that Mario 64 doesn't have an actual combat system, hasn't been addressed at all. And it doesn't necessarily need to be addressed. I'm not saying Mario should have a parrying system, though that would be kind of awesome. But if you're not going to change it, then maybe you don't need these bosses at all. Or at the very least, you should try not to make them worse. There's a reason you never fought King Bob-omb next to a bunch of fire spitters in the vanilla game. That's right, because the vanilla game was for babies. Also because it's more annoying than it is engaging. It forces you to play defensively and it drags out the fight. And don't even get me started on text box lag. This is just frustrating. I know I'm being pretty harsh on the bosses here, but the series actually introduced a solution to these issues with the Brodoot races, first introduced in Star Revenge 4. These are way more enjoyable because they test the best part of Mario 64, the movement, instead of its half-baked combat. I wish every boss encounter was like this, if not a Koopa race, then some sort of tough platforming challenge. I'd much rather play something that emphasizes clean movement over a fucking bullet hell. It would fit the rest of the game more, and cut out what is consistently my least favorite part of each Star Revenge hack. Alright, that was a really negative way to end this section, so don't get me wrong here. I like Star Revenge 4 quite a lot. While its levels aren't as tight as I would have hoped, they're still fun enough, especially with their emphasis on exploration. On top of that, this hack had some new ideas, and at least somewhat expanded on older ones. I wish these unique concepts had been explored more, but I'm still happy with the mere fact they exist at all. This hack may be far from a masterpiece, and again, you should probably just play the remake. But I really don't understand why Brodoot seemingly dislikes this one so much more than the other hacks released around this time. Maybe give it another look if you skipped over it. There's still fun to be had here. Alright, time for what is essentially a spin-off break. Maybe that seems like a bold intro to this section to some, but there's a reason this hack isn't titled Star Revenge 5, as you might expect. It's Star Revenge 0.5, the unused levels, and for the purposes of this video, it doesn't make a lot of sense to view this as the next main entry in the series. As the title implies, this hack is a collection of unused levels, some supposedly dating before the release of Star Revenge 1. So, while I imagine each stage was changed and refined from its original form before being officially released, one would imagine that the basic level structures are, at this point, outdated, or at least not an evolution of what we saw in Star Revenge 4. So, as a result, there's not a ton to talk about with this one, especially when you consider that this is another short 65-star hack. It, of course, has some good levels and some bad ones, but as a whole, there's not really anything to say about them. They're sort of disconnected. Some fall more in line with the Star Revenge 3 and 4 approaches to level design, and others feel more like Star Revenge 1. This actually isn't fully a bad thing. As much as I complained about linear level design earlier in this video, it's not bad in moderation, and in fact I kind of liked the variety here. But that also means it doesn't tell us much about the direction the series is headed. I would describe this hack as standard. It has no unconventional world structure, it doesn't have any defining level design ideas. Really, the only things that make it stand out are the prominent use of the color blue, which I think looks quite nice, and the Brodoot race for placing a final boss, which, as previously discussed, I like a lot. It's certainly not bad, there's still fun to be had here. But for this hack more than any other in the video, there's probably no reason to play it over its remake. There's not even much interesting history here. I can't really recommend this one to a casual player. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you gamers, the intro to this section has already gone through 4 completely different drafts. Star Revenge 6 Luigi's Adventure is a well-made hack. I didn't have any major issues with it, and there were few things that even mildly disappointed me. I simply enjoyed my time with it. But now, trying to write this section, I can't bring myself to feel much of anything about this hack. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it wasn't the brightest idea to play 6 Star Revenge hacks in a row, and then try to write probably the longest script in this channel's history. One might argue that you'd have to lose steam by the end, and that could create a bias against the later hacks in the group. One might argue a lot of things. All I know is that, as I stare into Luigi's eyes, I feel nothing anymore. Okay, that's not exactly true. There are a few things about this hack that I actually feel pretty damn positive about. First of all, I brought up that I liked the level themes in Star Revenge 4, and Star Revenge 6 takes it to another level. Not really in terms of creativity in the themes themselves, though more so in how those themes are used. Things like making the stars in the golf level correspond to the holes, or using void-out areas to emulate stealth in Time Rock's warehouse, are small details, but still appreciated. I don't know if I can say the same about Intruder Alert with no solos, though. That's kind of the worst part of this hack. For a more substantial integration of a level's theme into its gameplay, you can look at the Daystar Pantheon and Nightstar Sanctuary, which makes certain blocks solid depending on which level you enter, on top of being mirrored vertically. I know this is apparently a remix of an idea from SM74, but you cannot make me play that hack again, so you're going to have to compare those levels yourself. It's a cool level regardless, and it's executed well here. The final levels I want to bring up in this section are Back to the Beginning and Burning Harbor, because I couldn't find a good place to fit this point into the video, so I'm just kind of cramming it here. One of the strengths of making the Star Revenge hacks a series instead of a bunch of disconnected titles is that it can reuse content as little bits of fan service. My personal favorite example of this is the fact that Star Revenge 3 and 4 share the same hub, but 4 lets you take an exit that was previously blocked off. This kind of thing shows up a lot, actually, whether the levels are reused, remixed, or reimagined. Is it a way to save time and recycle content? Maybe. Probably, but that doesn't make it any less cool when you recognize something from a previous hack. This is one of the reasons I would recommend playing the Star Revenge hacks in order once you're an established fan. Newcomers should definitely not start here, but if you're looking to replay the Star Revenge hacks, there might be some details you never noticed if you just picked random ones like I did originally. Anyway, bringing us back from that tangent, Back to the Beginning is an amalgamation of the first two overworlds from Star Revenge redone, and Burning Harbor is a remake of the first level from Star Revenge 3. These level ideas aren't really the most interesting on their own, so I'm glad I've been playing the hacks in order, because with context, this is way more charming. The other thing I feel pretty positive about in Star Revenge 6 are the visuals, which can be really quite beautiful. Not all the time, mind you. There are kind of a lot of dark levels, and these never really look great. I can see the use of this kind of look if you want to create a spooky atmosphere, BBH style, but they're a little drab, and it's an easy aesthetic to overuse. There's also one level that I'd say has particularly bad visuals. It looks quite dated, and I don't know whether it's the textures themselves or the fact that there's only like 5 of them total in this unreasonably large level, but yuck. And now that I think about it, a level that's just floating in an empty void isn't necessarily the prettiest, and this one kind of looks like it came out of Star Revenge 1, not gonna lie, and... Okay, maybe I lied at the beginning of this paragraph. This hack has a few really nice looking levels. It makes shockingly good use of the Lethal Lava Land skybox, and this scrolling rain texture is a nice detail. These examples were good enough that I thought Star Revenge 6 looked great, but as I replayed it, I found a bunch of very mediocre looking levels that I just forgot about, so... well, here we are again. And I think that's just about everything I have to say about Star Revenge 6. Its levels are good, for the most part. This one is a little empty for its size, but besides that, there aren't any that I dislike. Some are schmoovier than others, but all of them are at least pretty fun. There's not really a central improvement to level design here to touch on. This is just a solid, yet kind of standard, bunch of levels. The hack's good. That's it. Go home. So, that was the Star Revenge series. What do you mean there's 15 more? I know I spent a lot of time complaining about these hacks, so I want to reiterate something. I love the Star Revenge series. All of the hacks I've covered in this video are pretty old now, and you can kind of feel it. But despite having some very clear issues, I still enjoyed my time with most of the hacks here. In fact, here's the official Logum channel ranking of early Star Revenge hacks based on 100% objective quality. The worst is 2, then 1, Redone, 0.5, 6, 4, and at the top, 3. If you disagree with this list, I expect a full video response outlining your criticisms. Don't worry, I will make a counter-response titled Addressing the Drama. No, in all seriousness, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these early hacks, or on the series as a whole, in the comments. I do worry that basically binging these skewed my judgment a bit, so my mind could definitely be changed on these placings. And if there are any non-Star Revenge fans who made it to this point, how? But also, if you want to get into the series, you really should not start here. You can probably pick any of the hacks in the current timeline and have a good enough time. Just check to make sure it's not a Kaizo one. That might be rough. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and keep gaming, gamers.